So originally, I wasn't going to make a video on this. However, I did a community post recently and I saw quite a few comments concerned about the design choices and how possibly the devs were censoring themselves versus previous games. Now honestly, to me, I was fine with the designs, but I got to thinking about it a lot, wondering if there was truth to the statements, and I think I can ease some of those people's fears, because for those who don't remember or didn't see my old videos, I was actually one of the people saying that the franchise didn't need as much fan service. In fact, I thought it would be more popular if it didn't have that in it. I thought that whenever a new console would come out, which is exactly what we have now, this exact situation, I thought that people will be excited to see what the Switch looked like, what the PS5 looked like, and what the Xbox Series X and S look like as well. And if it was more mainstream, then that could mean the series was safe. However, I was saying that in a different time, when the series was more popular than it was now, at the height of its popularity, I would say, with Mega Dimension, and it was late into the series, like it already established itself in the type of vibe that it had. I recognize now that this new game can make or break the series, and that anything the fans think is missing would actually be a detriment. Which is why I decided to tell you all what I think is going to happen and why it might not be as bad. First, let me address this. Yes, I do think the changes that they made were partially considering Sony's laws. But I also think you don't have to worry about that. Let me explain. With another game that I've been playing, Street Fighter. Even if you don't know the game, I at least think people know the characters Chun-Li or Cammy. In fact, Chun-Li, who is the main character I use, has actually been the #1 on a certain website in the past. So I think it's safe to say people at least know who Chun-Li is. And I remember playing Street Fighter 5 and there was a scene with Chun-Li and Cammy in it, and I saw Cammy just standing there. And I was thinking, wow, it really is strange for Cammy to be in that. And we surrounded by like a serious vibe, in a burned down city. Cammy just had buns out. And so when Street Fighter 6 came, I remember talking to my boy Crew 5 about this, and I thought that based on how Sony has been worried and cracking down on companies, Street Fighter might also be subject to that. And sure enough, it's been decades and Cammy's been in the same outfit, but now, suddenly, Cammy's wearing pants. And Cammy isn't the only one. There are other characters that they have more to work with, like Elena, for example. They come to this game, pants. But the key thing is their original fits were still in the game.
Silenced.
Oh! Yeah, all right. And this is where I'm going. My first point is that I think game companies are more so doing this, not just for Sony, but also for advertising. When they advertise the game, they want a commercial that a lot of people can see, and I think the Neptunia series is no different. By changing their attire, they make sure that this commercial can be run as much, because they need the advertisements, right? They need for as many people to see this game as possible. They need this game to be a hit. So what most people will see is something that can be shown on all platforms. However, once you get into the game, then that's when you can make your changes. And if you're worried, because I do remember, I think it was Super Neptunia RPG, they did start to crack down on some stuff. The PS4 had a censored version. Look at the last 2 games that have had this combat style. What did they have in there? Swimsuits. I mentioned Chun-Li before. Chun-Li had basic fits for the longest time, but eventually Street Fighter came out with the DLC, and then now no one is complaining about Chun-Li's fits. No one. I imagine that we are going to have the same type of scenario happen here. The base outfits might be like this, but then I cannot imagine why they wouldn't put the classic fits in there, because One example I can think of why they wouldn't is that they have to make the new outfits and the new engine. But since we have had 2 previous games testing this real-time combat, and I feel like it has to be the same engine, maybe I'm wrong, with animations already done, and when Idea Factory and Compile Heart were already doing the censorship things, those fits were already in the game, functioning like they did. I see little to no reason on why they wouldn't put the classic fits back in the game, especially when we already had a tire that was more risque in the games previously. So then, if they could do that before, is it only just for commercials? Why do they have to have this attire? Which leads me to my second point. I think it honestly just makes sense. Noir, Blonde, and Vert are the ones who really have that type of vibe to them, and they're supposed to be the seasoned veterans now. They're supposed to be, I'm assuming, in the more oracle roles, or, the wise advisors. For their current role, I think that attire honestly just fits them. That doesn't mean that you won't still have CGs like one of the most impactful ones, and I think the most extreme in the series by far, Mega Dimension. It was not because of what they were currently wearing. So their current fits in their normal forms, I think just simply matches the time period that they're in. And from that standpoint, I think it absolutely fits. Their transformations, on the other hand, well, I think we also have to keep in mind the flight. What do I mean by that? If you all recall, my favorite in the series, and fiction media in general, Orange Heart. I thought originally that Orange Heart had one of the most safe designs out there. And I still think that's true compared to the others. But then when you get late in the game, you get something like Blue Cast, and that changes the game. Considering that we can do more things with the goddess forms, because that's another thing. In the previous 2 games with this game mechanic, Sisters vs. Sisters, well, not game mechanic, but the action RPG, Sisters vs. Sisters and Game Maker, you couldn't do anything. You could not customize the goddess forms. But I think that went hand in hand with the goddess forms also being a kind of last resort thing, which I did not like. And that's immediately something I noticed was changed in the main canon game. It seems like once again, the goddess forms have a huge element to them again. And I can't see Idea Factory and Compile Heart letting us fly in those forms and not having customization available. That's going to be such a huge part of the game. For them to be stagnant, especially when that hasn't been the case in the previous mainline series games, I don't see that happening. And like I just mentioned with the normal forms, they've already had, at least for the main 8, which as far as I know, are the only ones confirmed from previous games, the main 8 should already have their previous attire modeled. So there should be no reason why they can't add that back into the main game. I think they didn't show them, 1, to keep it as a surprise, but also 2, because when you fly with those forms, it'll probably hit different. But let me add even more fire onto that. Because I think out of all of them, Blue Heart looks the most un-CPU-like. That looks like just a normal dress. That doesn't look like a processor unit. But I think that's the case because remember who's Blue Heart? The very same company that could have forced Idea Factory and Compile Heart to do this. I am gonna throw a hard theory and say that they are gonna throw some massive shots. And that Blue Heart might go through one of the most drastic changes. Because like I said, Neptune Rebirth 1 changed. Nepgear Rebirth 2 changed. When processors, I mean. Iris Heart did not, but Iris Heart didn't have to. See, and that's what I mean. I was bringing up Cameo before. Imagine, we haven't really walked around in a space with the CPU forms. The one time I think we did, I had a huge reaction to. It was in Virtual Stars and I had Vert's next form. That hits different. Imagine if you were to walk around or fly using Iris Heart's processor. That's a whole different game. Which is why I'm trying to tell people, I think they're waiting, and I suspect they're gonna give Blue Heart one of the most drastic transformations and say censorship was bad. It's part of the game, it'll literally be part of the story, and that's why you don't see it now. Now granted, I could be wrong on all of this. We might not be able to change the processors, although I think that's a mistake, and they've already done all the hard work in the previous games that you cannot tell me they didn't plan for this game with Scissor of Scissors and Game Maker. It's even to the point where those two games could have been considered canon if they wanted to. I strongly believe people will get what they want from this game. It might not be the most extreme like Mega Dimension, but I at least think people will be satisfied. From a model standpoint, it seems to me like if you kind of hide stuff or don't make it a part of the main game, like for example, a bunch of people talking about DLC. We've had DLC in the previous games. Uzume, Plutia, and Peachy make perfect sense if Plutia is a DLC, because they're like, we can't have Plutia actually in the main game because that would be pretty extreme. But as DLC, that kind of goes past stuff. Or maybe they'll only make it DLC for the Switch, and then when it comes out, the PC. Having multiple consoles is the last big part. They aren't just solely based with Sony. In fact, that could have been the reason they tried to make all their other games on the Switch come out before. Then the devs were always playing 5D chess so that this game could come out the best way. Oh, and I mentioned Blue Heart, but as far as Red Heart and Eclipse Heart, Red Heart, it just doesn't match Red Heart's personality. And Eclipse Heart, we'll see. You could say, Eclipse Heart I think is the biggest one, where you could talk about the designs, but I strongly feel they're gonna have a Vert style Eclipse Heart processor. If they allow you to change them, they're just trying to make sure to cover their bases now. But later, they'll give you all what you want. But those are just my thoughts. Please tell me what are yours. I feel pretty good about that. Like the more I talk, the more I was convincing myself. Even though again, like for me, I wouldn't be worried, but I understand other people are. The devs have to know that that was a part of their series and that they're not going to give it up. It's just that you might have to get to the game and purchase some stuff, resources that you might need for weapons and, healing items. But hey, if that's what you want, that's what you want. It just may be hidden deeper into the game. And this allows them to advertise the game to the best of their abilities. So with that being said, please, everyone, post your thoughts about this down in the comments below. Feel free to even let the Reddit people know too, because I'd be curious on what they have to say. And I will see you all next time.